Hello everyone, in today's video I will be showing you how to change the engine oil and engine oil filter in a third generation Toyota Prius. Specifically, my car is a 2010 model. And in order to complete this operation, you will need these supplies. First off, you'll need a pan to drain the engine oil into, and you want to make sure before you start that your pan is clean, so that you can tell if there's any contaminants or metal fragments that come out with your engine oil, which would indicate some engine damage. Secondly, you'll want a creeper to roll around on underneath the vehicle, followed by some rubber gloves to keep your hands clean, a 14mm socket and ratchet for taking off the plug for the oil pan, and you can use a 14mm wrench as well. And then for taking the filter housing off, I have this special tool here that takes a 1/2-inch ratchet to turn. You'll also want a pick for taking the O-ring off of the oil filter housing, some paper towels, a funnel, the engine oil filter element, which is Toyota part number 04152-YZZ-A6, and then your engine oil. You're going to need 4.4 quarts, and Toyota recommends that you use their OW20 oil, but today I will be using this Mobil 1 fully synthetic engine oil. So now that you know what we need, let's get into it. Okay, so before we begin the oil change, it's important to drive the car up on some ramps like I have done, or you could use a simple jack with some jack stands to hold it up. Just something to elevate the front of the car so that when you're crawling up underneath of it, you got a little more room to work and you don't feel so squished. So now that I've got the car up on some ramps, let's go underneath. Okay, next we will remove the plug from the oil pan using our 14mm socket and ratchet, or if you have a 14mm wrench, that works too. Turn it counterclockwise to loosen. And you can screw it out the rest of the way by hand. And now we will let that drain. Okay, so now while our oil is draining, we're going to remove the oil filter element housing, which is right here, and I have already put my tool on it like so. And once again, counterclockwise to loosen. Okay, so that's what the old element looks like. We will take that out, and you can just set that in your oil pan. Drain the oil out of that housing. And now I will show you how to remove the old O-ring off of this and put the new O-ring and filter element in it. Okay, so now that we have our old element removed, we will use our pick to remove the old O-ring. And they have this little notch here in the housing, which gives you a spot to remove it from. So take it and kind of just work it around the housing so you can just grab it with your hands. Pull the old one off. And now in your new filter box, it should come with a new O-ring. We will take that out and stick that on the housing. a little malformed being that it's been in a box. You just kind of work it down until it sits in that groove that the previous one was in. And then you take your new element, and it's universal on either side, so it doesn't matter which way it goes in, and you just stick it on there and just push down till it clicks in place. And now we are ready to put this on the car. Okay, so before we put our filter element back in the housing, we are going to take a paper towel and just clean this surface off. That way there isn't any obstructions to it when it tries to seal, so that it will help it to make a better seal. Okay, so before we stick this back in there, we want to make sure that we put some oil on this new O-ring so that it will help it to more properly seal around the housing. So I'll dip my finger in the oil and then just spread that around this O-ring. Then with that done, we can screw it into our housing. And I'll use my ratchet here to tighten it the rest of the way. And now it's important to get it snug, but you don't want to get it too tight. If you over tighten it right now, when you go to take it off on your next oil change, it's going to be a real pain. Okay, there I'm snug. So that is that complete. And now we will move on to our oil plug. Okay, so just like we did over here with the oil filter, before we put our plug back in, you'll want to take a paper towel and just wipe it around where the plug's going to go. That way there's no foreign material in that area. And then you want to take your freshly cleaned plug and dip your finger in the oil and use it to lubricate this O-ring to help it make a better seal onto the oil pan. Now with that done, you can take it and screw it into the oil pan. And then we will use our 14mm socket and ratchet to tighten that up. And once again, you want to get it snug, but not overly tight, so that it's not super tough to take off the next time. Okay, with that done, now we can move on to filling the motor with oil. Okay, on a third generation Prius, the engine oil fill will be right here on the top of the motor. So you can screw this cap off. And with that removed, we can insert our funnel, and it's important to make sure that your funnel is clean before you use it so you don't put any contaminants in your engine. And now we will pour our oil in, and as I said before, this engine takes 4.4 quarts of oil. Okay, so now that we've put our 4.4 quarts of oil in, we can really reinstall this filler cap. And then with a clean rag, we'll pull out our dipstick, wipe it off. Reinsert it. Pull it out again to verify that we have sufficient oil in the engine, which it appears that we do. And now I will stick this back in, and I'm going to turn the car on, let it run for about 30 seconds, and then shut it off and let it sit for maybe 10-15 minutes. And while it's sitting, I'm going to look underneath and check to make sure we don't have any oil leaks from the things that we just put back in. And then you can check your oil and make sure that it's between these two dots on the dipstick. You want to make sure it's not too low or too high, because both would be bad things. And if you're between those two marks, which you should be, then you're good to go. Okay, so as the last step in the oil change process, one thing I like to do is to go on the display here and then tab through until you get to trip B, and then just hold down the trip button on the steering wheel, which will reset that. That way you can keep track of how many miles it's been since your last oil change, and you can just instantly flip through and know. And you should also write down your oil change in a notebook, on a piece of paper, on your phone, somewhere, so that you can keep records of your oil changes, so that you'll instantly know when and how often you've done your oil changes, in case you need to sell the car or for warranty reasons. But yeah, besides that, that should be everything you need to know about changing your oil on a third generation Toyota Prius.